Hi, my love. Welcome to the Godly Femme podcast. My name is Chumoke Win, and here we discuss all things Christian hypergamy, leveling up, and godly femininity. Check us out at godlyfemme.com. Okay, ladies, today we're going to talk about when should you marry? Some Christian hypergamy lesson for you. So I believe that the best time for a young woman, 2024, who lives in, maybe the UK, US, maybe a first world country, I think the best age for women to cash out, get married, settle down, have a family is in their mid-20s. And I'm going to explain why. Now, if you were raised in a culture, a society that, raised you to be a wife, right? And you're second, third, fourth generation homesteader, homeschooler, homemaker, well then yeah, get married at like 18, 19, that's great. I think a lot of people get married at that age, but I'm talking about just the average modern day woman, especially Black women. What age do I feel like is appropriate to get married? I think mid-20s is the most appropriate, and I'm going to explain why. Well, first reason why I think that mid-20s is good versus maybe 18, 19 if you were not prepared for marriage. I always say that you don't have to be perfect to be married, but you have to be prepared. So if you were not prepared to be a wife, if you were not prepared for marriage, if you were not prepared for dating by your parents and how to vet and things like that, then you probably need a little bit more time. The average American is very just not prepared. Not prepared for the real world. We have a longer stretch of adolescence than most cultures. Most cultures, it's either you're a child or you're an adult. By the time you're 15, 16, you are a full-grown woman. You're ready to marry, settle down, have children. But in this generation, we have like teenage years, which was not even a thing a couple decades ago. There was no such thing as teenagers, right? It was just, again, you went from child to an adult. And now from teenagers, we have adulting, right? So it's still this next step of coddling that this generation has. So this generation is really not prepared for marriage by the time that they're 18. 15, 16, 18, by their teenage years, most people are not prepared for marriage. But if you are, then that's great. Go ahead and marry younger if you want to. I do think too, when you look at divorce statistics, there's a high rate of divorce for people who marry too young because, like I said, they're not prepared for marriage. But I do think that with age comes more maturity, especially for women. So here is a few more reasons why I think mid-20s is a sweet spot for young women to marry. The next thing is that you have the highest bargaining power in your 20s. Don't let people lie to you and say that 30s is the new 20. No, it's not. Okay. You know why? Because your body did not change. Women have what is called a 15-year window of this is your ideal time to marry and settle down and have kids, right? Obviously, you can have kids after 35. Obviously, you can get married after 35 and still have healthy kids, a healthy marriage. But things change after 35. We're talking about like dating dynamics, right? It changes. After 35, things begin to change for women, and things, start to shift, and the way that you date has to shift. After you get to 35, this is where women start panicking. This is when a woman realizes, oh snap, I had a biological time clock this whole time. And this is where all the lies and everything starts crumbling down, and she realizes, oh wait, hold on, no one is coming to save me, right? Because there's this assumption that, hey, if I just exist, then someone is just eventually going to come along and a Prince Charming is going to come and marry me. That is very Disney, but that's not kingdom. Okay, so I'm putting you young ladies on so that you can be prepared. But like I said, you have the highest bargaining power in your 20s. Okay, what you'll notice, and I don't want you young ladies to notice this, but once you hit your 30s, this is when everyone is more ready for marriage, even men. Men, I like I always say, the sweet spot for marriage for men is like early 30s. That's when a man has been established, he is more mature, he is ready to settle down and have a family and have kids, right? Usually early 30s is a good spot. However, men in their 30s are not looking for women in their 30s, generally speaking. Men in their 30s are looking for women who are younger, right? So it's not uncommon for a man who's 32 to look for a woman who is 26, 27, right? And like, again, if all things being equal, if he had to pick either a woman his age or a woman who is 27, he picked the woman who was 27. So this is why, again, you have a higher bargaining power because you are younger. Okay, so I always say, do not squander your youth. Don't squander your youth. Don't squander your looks. Don't squander it being a concubine. All right, cash out, be a wife. Okay, this is a great investment for young women. Marriage and a family is a great lifetime investment. So don't think that, oh, the career is the best thing ever. No, sometimes, not even sometimes, for the majority of women, an investment in a husband, a good husband, and children is probably one of the things that she is going to cherish for the rest of her life. Okay, so the next thing is you have an outlet for sex. Okay, so for most of you ladies who are trying to be abstinent, you are you love the Lord. Some of you guys might even be virgins, which I think is great. Like I always tell women, keep your virginity. Don't give it to a man for free 99 and he can't even give you his last name. But you have an outlet for sex. I don't think it makes sense for people, but I'm talking to women. You went through puberty around what, 11, 12, right? Your teenage years. It doesn't make sense to wait 2 years to do what your body naturally wants to do. Not 2 years, I'm sorry, 2 decades. Is it 2 decades yeah, if you went through puberty, yeah, that's 2 decades. That's your 30s, right? I'm like, wait, hold on. Yeah, if you went through puberty around 11, 12-ish, early teenage years, it doesn't really make sense for you to deny yourself for 2 decades, just abstaining when you can just be married and just have a place to have the outlet. Like the Bible says, if you don't have a gift of celibacy, it's better to marry. So if you're not asexual and you are, you have a very active sex drive because your body wants to make a baby, okay? Your body wants to continuously push the human race forward. It is better to just have one person to be able to do that with, right? Within marriage. So you don't want to be sitting here. I have women who come to me and they tell me things like, oh, Chimoke, I've been praying and fasting against lust, and I prayed for God to take away this desire from me, but how do you fight this demon? And I say, okay, when does this demon of lust come? Around the same time every month. And I'm like, girl, it's called ovulation. It's called ovulation. It's called your body has hormones so that you can make a baby. They want you to have sex to make a baby. Okay, that is what your body is doing. Right? We don't want to over spiritualize our own bodily functions. We just want to have a holy and a righteous outlet for it, which the Bible says is sex. So it's better to just have a partner, be married in your mid-20s, than to wait until your 30s, and some women even their 40s, when it doesn't matter as much. It doesn't have as much bargaining power than it does maybe in your 20s. For what? Right? So again, that's another reason why I think women should marry in their mid-20s. Another reason is by this age, most women are done with their degrees, right? You may have done maybe a 4-year degree, maybe even a master's. Okay, after that, right? After that, I think it is good for a woman to settle down. Now, this is my unpopular opinion, but this is just some advice for some young women. I say establish and settle your home first before you go for more rigorous degrees. No one has ever told you this, right? What a lot of women, especially Black women, do, even immigrants, this is what they do. They sit here and they encourage their daughters to go to school to essentially be their own provider. I have no problem with you having your own passion. If this is something you really want to do, then that's great. But what ends up happening is because the program that they're in is so rigorous, they completely put off marriage and family planning until their 30s, when they are fully established. They are waiting until they are this age and they have all this money, and then they're like, okay, now I've arrived. But the issue with that is that you miss the, how do I say it, the most formative, like the peak years, right? The best years for you to marry, right? When you had the highest bargaining power, which was your youth, and also you have debt. People are not talking about this. You have debt, right? Well, if you don't, that's fine, right? If you can go to a higher education and maybe you do law degree and maybe do a medical school, whatever, and you can get out of it debt free or low debt, then that's great. The issue arises is you racked up so much debt. I know I've heard of this one woman who had $150,000 of student loan debt because she went to law school. And then on top of that, another $20,000 in credit card debt. If you rack up a whole lot of debt, you are going to have to do 50-50 with a man. What man? Because that man now has to incur that debt, right? So a man has to not only marry you, want to marry you when you're older and you're not maybe as fertile or whatever, his own preference. He probably is looking for someone who's younger. And then he has to incur tens of thousands of dollars of debt, and he has to pay that by himself. Because what's going to happen is women, when they finally have that first child, that's when the hypergamous gene kicks into women. And they're like, hey, I'm tired of paying 50-50. Hey, I want to stay home with my kids. Hey, I'm tired of doing all the chores in the house, the cooking and the cleaning, and I'm not getting any help. I don't want to work anymore. I don't want to be a medical doctor. I don't want to be a lawyer. And it's like, yeah, but you have $150,000 of student loan debt. Who's going to pay that? Who's going to pay it? Right? So I think it's better, okay? Cash out first. Marry first and then go to school later. School is always going to be there. Where are you running to? Right? It's an option. Maybe no one's ever told you that this was an option. It may not work for you. It may work for you. Hey, take it or leave it. It's just advice. If you really in your heart desire to maybe do a PhD, a doctor, you want to go to med school, dental school, law school, whatever higher education, I would say wait till your kids are out of their formative years and then go back, right? Wait, like have your kids, get married, have your kids, wait until maybe they're like, at least old enough to be by themselves, right? I would say maybe 7 to 10, right? And they're like, okay, they're a bit older, and now you can dedicate a bit more time to study and focus on school, but your family has already been established. The career is not running anywhere, okay? It's not going anywhere, but your time to start a family is. That is extremely important. So I would say, if you have a first degree and maybe a second degree, then okay, after that, you've already had enough time to be a woman, you've experienced the world, maybe some of you have traveled a little bit, you lived on your own. For me, once I paid a big girl bill, I said, all right, that's enough, time to get married. But, so you still are in a good spot. So if you can go to school without debt or with low debt, I would say definitely consider that as an option. The next two more reasons. The next reason is you're still moldable. The issue that happens when women get older, especially past their mid-20s, after they left college, after they're done with their degrees, they've established themselves as women, they become very fixed. When you're younger, you have more optimism about dating and marriage and love, right? You want it more. You're like, oh my gosh, I just want a boyfriend, I want a husband, whatever the case is, right? That's why I'm like, it's good because you don't have as many negative life experiences that can harden women over time, right? If you know how to date, if you are hypergamous, if you date with strategy from the beginning, right? And if you have a mentor or you have parents who are helping you to date for marriage, then that's great. But as you get older and you're like, okay, I already have enough money. You don't need a provider. You don't need a protector. You've been protecting yourself. You've been providing for yourself. At this point, you are just looking for a sidekick. And women start to become more masculinized the older they get when they are not married. This is an observation that I've seen. because they have been so used to doing everything on their own, right? And sometimes even their career requires them to be more masculine, requires them to work harder. And, we're on a deficit because we don't have as much testosterone as men. So we're working overtime, right? As women, we're not being kind to ourselves. We're no longer soft. We're no longer feminine. And that also hurts our chances as we date. So as women get older, marriage, even though they don't say this, becomes just a nice to have. It's like a Birkin bag. Like, oh, I just want this because, it's a nice to have. I just want to check mark off that I did it. But they become less focused on it. That mid-20s to mid-30s is a space that there's a lot of deception that happens with women until 35. After 35, then the mask falls off, and then a lot of women are like, oh my gosh, my biological time clock is ticking. Oh my gosh, where are all the men that, wanted me when I was 25? Oh my gosh, I want my eggs cracked today. I'm just trying to rush to the altar. After 35, panic begins to set in. So you don't want to wait that long. So, and the last reason why I think you should marry your mid-20s is because you can family plan better. All right. Sometimes when I speak to women, I don't think they've really planned out what they want out of life and how it's going to happen and realistic timelines for themselves. I think a lot of women are very short-sighted. So this is how some women think. They're like, oh yeah, I want to do maybe med school, right? Which there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. You want to do med school. By the time that you're finished, right? You did 4 years undergrad, 4 years medical school, 3 years residency, and that's not even including gap years to study for the MCAT or whatever. Then you want to do a fellowship, whatever. Okay. By the time that you have settled yourself, you are now in your 30s. Okay. And then on top of that, you want to date and you want to get commitment from a man. Let's say that takes 6 months of dating, active dating. Okay. 6 months dating. Now you have a man. Now, some of y'all like to be in relationships for 2 years plus. Let's just say 2 years ideally. In 2 years, finally he proposes to you. Okay. Now he proposes to you. You want to wait an entire year. Some people even more than a year, but let's just say 1 year to plan the wedding. Okay. 1 year to plan the wedding. Now you're finally married. Oh, but hold on. You don't want to jump into having kids yet. You want a couple of years to just enjoy one another, right? And then on top of that, you want 3 kids, but you don't want to have them back to back. You want to wait at least 2 years in between every child before you try again. Where is the time, Funke? Where's the time? Like at that point, you're already in your late 30s, you're 40. And when you realize, oh, I don't actually have as much time as I should. If you wanted that path, you should have started in your 20s. If that's the idea that you had for your mind and your family and to family plan, you should have started in your 20s, right? But now that you're older, if you don't start dating and thinking about dating until your 30s, a lot of things have to be rushed, right? Vetting men has to be rushed. Having kids has to be rushed. Everything has to be rushed because your biological time clock is blaring. So don't have that happen to you. Plan better. Plan to, maybe plan to settle down by your 20s where you have, you have the highest bargaining power in your mid-20s, right? Men want to marry women who are in their 20s, who are 30s, right? They're ready for marriage. They want to marry women who are younger. Cash out in your 20s. So I hope that this femininity lesson, mentorship lesson helped you. Let me know what you think and I'll speak to you later. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Godly Femme podcast. If you would like more help in your femininity journey, make sure that you do sign up for our 7-day Godly Femininity Challenge, and also that you join our free Facebook mentorship group, Black Hypergamous Christian Women. All the details are in the description.